Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence celebration of World Unity Week. I am so blessed to be here with a very dear friend of mine, Eleanor LeCain. And Eleanor, I met through Barbara Marx Hubbard, and that's who we're celebrating today. Legacy as the Co-Creators Convergence is one of her stepchildren, so many that she has. And Eleanor is bringing with her a dear friend, Marianne Williamson, who we know is an amazing being. I loved your last book, Returns Love. There's so many wonderful things we can say about Marianne, but I'm going to give Eleanor that honor. So I'm turning this over to you now, Eleanor, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop my video and mute myself. I am told, though, that Marianne will be reading chat. So if you have something that you would like to put into chat.
Okay.
If not, we'll sneak it into Eleanor, but we're looking forward to this. I'm going to call it a historic conversation between two friends and political activists that have known each other for decades. So how does it get any better than that?
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Noelle, and thanks for bringing us all together. And it's so wonderful. The whole World Unity Week is bringing the whole world together to figure out how do we build more unity. It's just such an incredible time right now. It's like this planetary drama. Will we transform or will we die? And it's a big question out there. And who better to have that conversation with and get guidance from than the magnificent Marianne Williamson. I'm sure you all know Marianne as a New York Times bestselling author, spiritual leader, and a recent candidate for the President of the United States when I had the honor of serving her as a policy advisor, which was the most fabulous job of my lifetime. So Marianne, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Exciting.
It's very exciting. You know, I think a lot of people are just freaked out right now. There's stress, worry about health with the pandemic, worry about the economy. Can I pay the bills? And it looks like the whole world is falling apart. What do you see as happening at this time? Is this like a cosmically arranged moment of history for the possibility of transformation, or is it like the whole thing is just going down the tubes?
Well, you named it eloquently and perfectly and correctly. We will evolve or we will die. We all learned when we were children about evolution and how when a species, if it begins to manifest behavior that is maladaptive for its survival, that one of two things will happen. It will either evolve, it will mutate and evolve into a new state of collective behavior, or it will go extinct. And the human race now collectively manifests behavior that is maladaptive for our survival. And specifically for those of us who are American, our democracy, our government, our collective public policy, matrix of public policy is maladaptive for the survival of our democracy. So it's something that affects us as Americans, and it's also collective behavior on a collective level, all of which is maladaptive for our survival and for the best of who we are. So we're living now, and I think that most of us can see that. I think everybody on a call like this can see it, that we're living through a great reckoning. In Course in Miracles terms, yes, we have free will. Every thought, every action will manifest, will create form on some level. But anything that is loveless, anything that lacks reverence, is what the Course in Miracles would call a miscreation. Everything that is a product of love is a co-creation with God. Everything that is a product of lovelessness is a miscreation. And there's an interesting line in the Course in Miracles that says, there is a limit beyond which the Son of God cannot miscreate. What that means is that if you continue in a loveless direction long enough, it will stop working. It will be too much against against nature. Yes, you can desecrate your planet. Yes, you can put money for the oil and gas industry before environmental reverence. You can, but there will come a point where that will stop working because the desecration of the environment will start to become unsustainable for life on Earth. And you can look at various areas where all within the construct, and of course you and I, Eleanor, have been talking about this for decades, where the United States, particularly over the last 40 years, and so much of this, you schooled me in the specifics of this. So I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but over the last 40 years, we transitioned from the basic ideals of American democracy, which are equality and justice for all, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, to this idolatrous notion that our devotion should be not so much to those ideals of democracy as to short-term profit maximization for large corporations. And their undue influence on our government has taken our government away from advocacy for people and planet and animals and turned it into a handmaiden for this sociopathic bottom line of corporate profit. Now, why do I say sociopathic? I say sociopathic specifically with an audience like this that understands what that means. That means no empathy, no ethics, no moral consideration. And so many people in a group like this have read books like Sociopaths Among Us. We know what happens when people have been divorced from a sense of moral and compassionate responsibility towards the other. We know that this is abuse, and we know that you must set your boundaries with behavior like that. And that is what is going on collectively. And we are reaping the consequences. And we are now at a point, the Course in Miracles says, it is not up to you whether you learn through joy or what you learn, but merely whether we learn through joy or through pain. People like you and I, Eleanor, and millions of others have been trying to make the call for decades. Wrong way to go, wrong way to go, wrong way to go. And at this point, as my friend Carolyn Mace says, nature is no longer giving you the opportunity to change. It is commanding you to change. And yes, these are chaotic times because the transition is upon us, whether we like it or not. The good news, though, is that there is this massive awakening. You know, the good news is that how many people recognize the bad news. And I think that in the higher consciousness community, both of which you and I are rooted in, there has been a pattern of chronic disengagement from politics. So what happened was we looked at politics, we realized how toxic it was, and a lot of the best and the brightest, particularly the most spiritually oriented thinkers went, oh, it's so toxic, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Well, guess what? That only made it more toxic. And the more toxic it got, the more the spiritual higher consciousness type said, I don't want to do anything with it, to the point where people realize you can't surround yourself in a pseudo-spiritual bubble and think that what's happening on the planet in the larger society is not going to get to your private door. I've been saying for years, good luck with all that green juice. Good luck with all that gluten-free diet. Because if they're poisoning the air and they're poisoning the water, it's going to become a problem for you. COVID is a perfect example. The dismantling of so many of the governmental agencies that were set up for our protection by forces that really didn't want a government that was here to serve the people, but really wanted to transfer control to corporate private interests. People are understanding that some things have to be controlled by agencies that are in charge of the public interest for reasons such as COVID, for such reasons as environmental breakdown, for such reasons as nuclear issues, et cetera. So you and I are living, and I'm sure everybody on this call is very aware of it, in this simultaneous drama of the death of an old order, which had to die. We are being rocked to our core, but we all know this had to happen. It is a great reckoning. People on this call are those of us who already understand. What we're seeing played out collectively is the kind of thing that people on a call like this understand how it plays out individually. We simply need to apply these same principles and know that all the collective is a group of individuals. So the same individual psychological and spiritual principles that apply in the life of one person apply in the life of a nation. Simultaneous to this breakdown of the old order is this rebirth. Lincoln said, you know, it's all in the Gettysburg Address. He said that the minute Gettysburg had died, so we would have a new birth of freedom, so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. It's perishing now in our time. And it is our turn to rise to the occasion as other generations have before us, so that we too can have a new birth of freedom. We are standing at a crossroads. We will either go deep into a neo-fascist authoritarian chapter of American history, unlike anything I think we've ever seen in our history, or we will emerge into a place of social and political enlightenment that is also unlike anything we've ever seen. And I believe that many of those, including the types who would be on a call like this, who have been the most involved with and practicing the principles of enlightenment, have so much to give. We've been withholding our gifts. You and I have talked about this a million times, because this is where you and I both live. The higher consciousness gang has been standing on the periphery of political and social and economic change. I've always thought we're the last people who should be standing on the sidelines. We should be the biggest grown-ups in the room, because if you know what changes one life, you're the one who has the clue as to what would change the world. And the fact that conversations like this are existing is an example of the fact that, yeah, we're here. And the Course in Miracles says an idea grows stronger when it is shared. So as I see processes like what we are participating in today, we are incubating the new collective conversation. We've already, the higher consciousness community has already impacted mainstream culture. Everything we touch transforms. Businesses transform. Where do you think all those mindfulness techniques come from? Our crowd. Where do you think all those yoga mats come from? Our crowd. We have not transformed politics only because we haven't gotten there yet. And that's what we are doing now.
Beautifully said, so eloquent, and such great insight into the moment that we live in right now. It has been a concern of mine, and I know of yours over time. Sometimes people who have a belief in a higher power or God think that that higher power is going to protect humanity and not let us go down. But, you know, we know this free will. And as you said, there are limits to your ability to create without love and to miscreate. And we're hitting those limits now, like destroying so many of the animals in our own natural habitat. So, you know, it's got to stop. I've also been concerned, some people, yes, there is an evolutionary drive towards a higher order, but, you know, unless you make it through that birth canal, you're not necessarily going to hit that. It's not like we can sit there and watch the planetary drama unfold knowing that we're going to make it. We actually don't know the outcome, and it so depends on what each of us choose to do. And you've done such incredible work inspiring people and helping people understand, you know, you can't sit on the sidelines. Democracy is not a spectator sport. We actually create this country, create this world with every thought, every word, every deed that we do. So we need to engage, and particularly we need to engage, as you say, in what's toxic, politics and government. And you've been brilliant at bringing those insights of a new, you know, what the elements of a new order would be, and into the political arena with such eloquence and grace and power. I was just wondering, you know, it can be a little bit of a dark time in the sense the only shared vision we have is like going down the tubes with Armageddon. Can you share a little bit, and you did this so well in your presidential campaign, what your vision is of a positive future, like if we do engage, what we could create?
We can create a world in which there is no war. We can create a world in which everyone is fed. We can create a world in which the earth has repaired itself. We can create a world in which there is no unnecessary suffering. You know, I remember hearing Dennis Kucinich say years ago, we must challenge the belief that war is inevitable. Mm-hmm. You know, when I talked earlier about how we manifest behavior that is maladaptive for our survival, one category of that maladaptive survival, maladaptive behavior is that we fight too much. And with weapons of mass destruction beyond the capacity of any of us to even imagine in terms of the suffering that it could and would produce. You know, right now we're learning because of COVID that we were skating on very thin ice when it comes to infectious disease. But the truth of the matter is that we are skating on similarly thin ice when it comes to nuclear power. You know, we have 7,000 nuclear bombs in our own arsenal. When it came to something like infectious diseases, most Americans thought, oh, well, somebody's watching the store.
Right.
Somebody's taking care of that stuff. We've now learned actually they weren't, because such agencies as that were dismantled and undermined to such an extent. Anybody who thinks, oh, when it comes to nuclear power and the nuclear power plants, we're cool because they're watching. Our same is true, and the recklessness of so much of our foreign policy, which is why you and I both have stood so strongly for a Department of Peace. We must proactively wage peace. Americans have gotten into the habit collectively of behaving very reactively rather than actually proactively to prevent disasters that would otherwise take us to global catastrophes almost unimaginable. So first of all, we have to have the vision of what we want, i.e., a world in which everyone's fed, a world in which everyone has an opportunity. And you know, people like Buckminster Fuller have proven it is possible. It is the world that we want is simply the product of a different social agreement. I want to tell a story that really, I remember it so impacted me. The woman who told me this story has since passed. She was a wonderful woman named Charlotte Patton. And she was talking about the shift to the year 2000, and remember how it was such a big deal, midnight and all that. And one of the things that we all watched on television was fireworks in Sydney, Australia, and fireworks in Beijing, and fireworks in New York, and the whole world was celebrating the shift from the past millennium to the new one. And she told me about her ride on the subway in New York that day. She said, I took the same subway ride that I always take, but every day, everybody's only concerned with themselves and jostling and the same old drama that we know of everybody being the way they are. She said, but on that day, it was one big party. Mm-hmm. On that day, we were all talking to each other. On that day, we were all like sharing cookies and things. And all Eleanor had really changed was the social agreement. Mm-hmm. That's all that had changed. It had changed from every man and woman for themselves to, hey, we're in this together. So we are now having to incubate, which we're doing with things like this, articulate and legislate a bridge from behavior that is maladaptive and that represents a level of human consciousness which is stuck at me, I'm in this for myself, to we. We are here as part of a collaborative venture. And just as cells in the human body collaborate to serve the healthy function of the organ and the organism of which they are part, and when one cell breaks off, decides I don't want to be part of the healthy functioning of the lungs anymore, and goes off to do its own thing and gather around it other cells similarly disconnected from the collaborative matrix. That's called cancer. It's a malignancy. And that disconnection from the collaborative matrix is a malignancy in human consciousness as much as it is a malignancy in the body. And that is what has happened to humanity. We have been infected by a malignant consciousness. And that malignant consciousness is the thought that it's all about me. Mm-hmm. And that is an unsurvivable focus of our collective behavior. Now, in the United States, we are proud of the concept of rugged individualism, and it is a high side of the American character. And it is an ultimate product of enlightenment thinking, what the individual can do. And a lot of our positives come from that, entrepreneurialism, etc. But we become unbalanced because that must be balanced with a concern for the collective good. In too many cases, our rugged individualism has transitioned into rugged narcissism. And that has taken us to where we are. Particularly individual financial profit, placed before the well-being of the collective, the planet, our grandchildren, our animals, and so forth.
That is so true, and that is exactly the journey we need to take from the me to the we. And by the way, I think of that when I write your initials, MW, it's like from the me to the we.
No, that's great.
And
I hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
And what a great story from the woman in the New York subway. And it's so interesting, that's inside of us, that ability to connect and to want to support each other. And to some extent, that's come out in our country and the world with the COVID crisis. I was reading about the US military back in the 1950s wanted to do research about how to bring the military in to restore control after natural disasters. And they sent a team out to Alaska as the first research right after a giant earthquake. And they thought that people would be at each other's throats and they would be looting and people with guns. But what the researchers found was people helping people. And someone stepped forward and said, okay, I'm going to organize the digging out. Someone else stepped forward, I'm going to organize, we deliver food to everybody. And people just kind of organized themselves to take care of each other. And they realized after decades of study, that was not an anomaly. That is generally how people respond to a crisis. So we've got it in us. We just need to recognize that and pull that forward.
Well, we routinely behave that way after a tragedy. It was the same way after 9/11 down at the World Trade Center neighborhood. And it's the same way now. Look at the doctors and the nurses. So many people responding, the first responders, et cetera. So many people responding with such compassion around COVID. You see the best of America. The problem is we need to stop showing our best only in times of tragedy. Now, I also want to say this. I think when it comes to our individual lives, we are a good, decent, dignified people. And I think the average American does try to live a good life and treat other people well. I don't think the problem is in the character of the American people. The problem is that we have a government that no longer displays and expresses the best of the American people. That's what democracy is supposed to be. Democracy is supposed to be collective behavior, which is all that public policy is, that expresses the consciousness of the people as expressed through free elections. And the problem is, number one, so much effort to obstruct those free elections through gerrymandering, voter suppression, et cetera, through the undue influence of corporate money on the system. And also, as we were talking about before, the fact that too many Americans have disengaged from the political system, have been so distracted or falling for whatever spurious pseudo-spiritual belief that it's too toxic, so I'm not supposed to do that. And it became a toxic brew. And to say the government got away from us is an understatement.
Absolutely. And you're so right about the need for people, particularly people of consciousness and awareness, to engage politically. I know some people see, oh, well, Marianne was this brilliant author of A Return to Love and talking about love and A Course in Miracles. And now she's off doing the political stuff, and they don't see how you reconcile those. But to me, it's always been precisely because you had the awareness, the understanding, the love and the compassion, you understood the need to bring that into our politics and government. And hence your new book, A Politics of Love.
Not only that, but there is no serious political or spiritual path that gives anyone a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. Earth to memo, memo to earth. Jesus did not come to earth to say, love yourself. That was not his message. Okay. He didn't say love yourself. He said love one another. And how we can claim to be so spiritual and think that spirituality gives us some kind of cover, an excuse for not addressing the fact that 12,000 children needlessly starve on earth and call that spiritual is, people are beginning to see that for the ego manifestation that it is. Our crowd had our own shadow, right? And in the Course in Miracles, the idea is that God's plan for the healing of the world is what is called the plan of the teachers of God. And the teachers of God are sent into whatever field we're sent into to be the presence of the alternative. One field, obviously, one field that I've felt drawn to be hopefully the presence of the alternative has been spirituality and religion, but it also a field I feel drawn to be seek to be the presence of the alternative is politics. Anybody claiming to judge what my guidance was based on the Course in Miracles was a joke that only the ego could come up with.
Well said. And it's so interesting. So many people do sit on the sidelines, and we know in 2016 about a quarter of the people voted for Donald Trump. We know about a quarter of the people, plus 3 million, voted for Hillary Clinton, but about 50% of the potential American voters didn't bother to vote at all. So, it's just like so many, and what was obviously a critical election with a clear diversion of choice, people kind of sitting it out. And you have inspired so many people to get off the sidelines and to get involved. What's your advice to people who have been kind of watching it all with like horror or disdain? And what's your advice to how do they begin? Like, where do they start to get involved and to be engaged?
Well, first of all, I think all of us in our community need to remember that there are more books than self-help books. There's almost sometimes an anti-intellectual trend in our crowd that's silly because it's not like we're not filled with intelligent people. I would certainly recommend my book, Politics of Love, that I think has a lot of the information about the intersection of spirituality and politics. My book, Healing the Soul of America. But in terms of getting involved, I think we have to have an intelligent understanding of what has occurred here. In 1965, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act. It was directly in response to the way segregationists made it routinely very difficult for Black people to vote, particularly in the American South. The Voting Rights Act was very good, and it not only protected the voting rights of Black people, but of all Americans. In 2013, led by the John Roberts-led Supreme Court, with him writing the majority of opinion, which is something he had been at for quite a few years, the Supreme Court chipped away at the Voting Rights Act. Now, this is extremely significant, and I love the Ruth Bader Ginsburg dissent because this is what she said.
Yes.
She said, well, let's figure this out. So it was raining, and we built a really strong umbrella in 1965. And now you're saying, well, it's not raining. We're not getting wet anymore, so we don't need this umbrella. She said, the only reason we're not getting wet anymore is because of the umbrella. So you start chipping away at the umbrella, we will get wet. And she was absolutely right. So as soon as they started chipping away at the voter suppression efforts, all these voter suppression efforts began all around the country. We're seeing them in full display right now. Louisville, Kentucky, the other day, closing polling stations, et cetera. Now, a few years ago, the House Democrats did come up with this bill, H.R. 1. That is really the pro-democracy movement that we need in this country. Getting at gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is where, and the Democrats do this as much as the Republicans, is where the people who are in charge of the state house start drawing the lines of congressional districts to protect the incumbents, to protect the candidates that reflect the party that is in charge in the state house. And that is why what we have right now, we have basically a government by minority. You know, the consciousness of the American people, if you look at the polls, we're a little left of center. We're a centrist nation, a little bit to the left. But you look at the way our government operates, and it's moving more far right every day. And that is because of these things, because of voter suppression, because of gerrymandering. Also, H.R. 1 made voting, voting day should be a holiday. We should be making it easier rather than harder to vote. We should have, we should be a country in which your voting is automatic on your 18th birthday. And when I was running, I actually suggested that, that voting be made 17 years old rather than 18. When you think of all these kids in high school, if anybody is at the effect of some of the craziness, namely the NRA, it's those kids, and they should have a right to vote. So there's a two-pronged approach to the kind of revolutionary fervor that is taking place at this time. First of all, we must keep it peaceful. We must keep it peaceful, but we want to remember that our Constitution was written giving us the right of peaceful protest.
Peaceful and nonviolent.
And these protests, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Peaceful and nonviolent.
Absolutely. That
Right.
is taking place, but we also, the protests must also be demonstrated at the polls. And that has to do with primaries that are going on right now, as well as the presidential election in November. Now, on my website, I have a list of endorsements of candidates that people, if you do agree with me that we must transition from an economic bottom line to a humanitarian bottom line. You know, if money does not come from crumbs dropped from the table of corporate aristocrats in the form of job creation. Money comes from the creativity and the productivity of the American people. Give me an education. That's what the average American feels. Give me an education, give me health care, give me a chance, and I'll create my own damn career. I don't need this paternalistic thing like, oh, let's give all the money to this small group of people and then maybe they'll create a job for me. The only people they're creating jobs for are the politicians that they're buying. So it's a real shift. It's a transition in paradigm. And each of us, every person here has a congressional election this time. And some people on this call have a senatorial election this time, and all of us have a presidential election this time.
And you are so right about how wealth is created in the country from the ingenuity of the people and hard work. I always thought it was bizarre that right-wingers thought if you want to motivate rich people, give them a tax cut. If you want to motivate poor people, pay them low wages. Like, how do they even reconcile that? But, you know, you have talked about the power of the corporations and their influence on our government. And even now, this whole thing, you mentioned the voter suppression and so many other ways, the corporations of wealthy individuals are distorting our public policy, blocking climate action, blocking gun reform and so forth. People look at that sometimes and goes, well, they have so much money, they have so much power. My one voice, my one vote doesn't matter. What do you say to people who say my voice, my vote doesn't matter?
Well, first of all, let's be real careful. Not every rich person is a greedy bastard. And not every poor person is noble and pure. So this isn't about making rich people bad. The problem in America is not that people can create wealth. That's a good thing. The problem in America is that not enough people right now can create wealth. Too many people are locked out. When you have millions of children going to school in schools where they don't even have the adequate school supplies with which to teach a child to read, the chances of that child ever graduating from high school are drastically diminished. The chances of that child becoming an adult and incarcerated are drastically increased. Millions of Americans were living in an economic lockdown and lockout even before COVID. So this isn't about making money bad. This is about making sure that the opportunities for wealth creation are more evenly distributed. And the greatest tool to that opportunity is education. That's why not only universal preschool, but also universal access to free tuition at state colleges and universities is so important. If what we've done over the last 40 years is just make a tinier and tinier portion of Americans have easy access to healthcare, have easy access to education, etc. And so it goes. I'm sorry, Eleanor, I wanted to make that clear, but I can't remember your original question.
No, well, you spoke right to it, and you talk about I love actually entrepreneurship.
Oh, you said what can one person do? You can do.
What can we, yeah, what do you say to people who feel their voice doesn't
Okay,
matter?
so let's look. Well, just look at what's happening. The other
Yeah.
night in Kentucky, Amy McGrath was the chosen candidate of the Chuck Schumer Democratic establishment elite. They had brought in for her candidacy $41 million. Now, there were two progressives running. One of them was clearly the choice of progressives in Kentucky. His name is Charles Booker. He raised $800,000.
Oh, wow.
He is winning. Now, the final results will not be established for the next few days, but he's definitely ahead. So when enough people vote and enough people vote in a progressive direction, same is true with the election the other night of Jamal Bowman in the Bronx in New York, who beat Elliot Engel. Elliot Engel he had been there for decades, and he was endorsed by the corporatist elite arm of the Democratic Party. So what you've got in the Republican Party is that it's been so taken over and bought and sold by by corporatist elements. In the Democratic Party, you have two main pieces. The corporatist elements of the Republican Party, which unfortunately have pretty much taken over the Republican Party. They really believe, I don't want to, cast aspersions on their intentions, whatever. The cynical among us would say, yeah, because of the money, the donations. Maybe it's their honest belief, whatever. We don't have to go there. We don't have to personalize this. But they vote consistently in favor of advocacy for short-term profits, for corporate interests, as opposed to advocacy for the interests of the American people and the planet on which we live. The Democratic Party, the corporatist element of the Democratic Party, says it's really terrible what all that does. And we want to make it easier for people who are suffering at the effect of that. But because of the money we're getting too, we won't challenge the underlying forces that make all that suffering inevitable. What progressives stand for is fundamental pattern disruption through recognizing, number one, that tax policy is the main tool of the corporatist order. In 2017, a $2 trillion tax cut where 83 cents of every dollar, I'm laughing, Eleanor, because you schooled me in so much of this, 83 cents of every dollar went to the large corporations and individuals under this canard that they are the job creators. That's what we were sold in the 1980s, that yes, we'll give that small group of people all that money, but it will be great because all that money will trickle down and lift all boats. After 40 years, the jury is in. It did not lift all boats. It has left millions and millions of people without a life vest. It has destroyed America's middle class and created the biggest income inequality since 1929. Now, some people say we can take incremental steps to change this. The Republicans are mainly filled with people who don't even want to change it. The corporatist Democrats say we'll change it through an incremental approach. But the progressives say what Martin Luther King said, which is that we cannot afford what he called the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. It's gone too far. At this point, we need Medicare for all. At this point, we need free college tuition in state colleges and universities. We need a fundamental pattern disruption through a massive infusion of economic hope and opportunity into the life of the average American in the form of a universal basic income, which is an idea that's been around forever. And right now, the fact that the American government is not giving direct cash relief is unbelievable. It borders on evil. In other countries, in England, for instance, 80% of somebody's salary is being given to them every month directly by the government. The fact that Americans got, I'm sure many on this call, got the $1,200 one-time payment. How, and then our Secretary of the Treasury called that liquidity, bridge liquidity. How are people supposed to live? We had 93 million people living near poverty even before the COVID happened. We had 40 million people even before COVID who were hungry. 40% of Americans even before COVID could not afford an unexpected $400 expenditure. We are right now living in a time of mass evictions, Hunger is getting worse. COVID is on the rise, and our government is still not talking direct cash relief. It is immoral. Now they have increased the unemployment payments, but there are so many millions of Americans who are not eligible for those payments, and the level of suffering that is being experienced among average American people is unacceptable, and the fury and moral outrage that people feel is totally reasonable.
So true. And, we had an economic crisis back in 2008. It was an opportunity then to kind of spread the wealth more and uplift more people. But so much of the bailout went to favor the corporations and the already wealthy. And I'm very concerned about seeing, like you're talking about, the pittance of $1,200 to the individuals here, and then $500 billion giveaway with no accountability to Trump's corporate friends. It's just like a banana republic.
It is like a banana republic. And what you just said is so important. What they're doing now, they created the template in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Bail out Wall Street, not Main Street. That's what they did in 2008. And it's the same template, but on steroids now.
Right. So now is the time for all of us to step out, whatever level we're at, step it up, do more. And I'm wondering.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I see in the chat people saying, but what can we do other than voting? Get involved in the campaigns now. Right now, in some of these, for instance, if you come from Colorado, Andrew Romanoff, a week from now, is the primary between Andrew Romanoff and John Hickenlooper. John Hickenlooper is a nice man. I met him on the campaign, but he's a corporatist Democrat. Romanoff is the progressive. Betsy Sweet in Maine. Shahid Buttar in San Francisco, Jen Perelman running against Ebby Wasserman Schultz in Florida. I hope everyone here will go to Marianne.com, look at the Progressive Candidate Summit, and you'll see who some of these people are. Find out what's happening in your district, and don't wait for November. Get involved in these candidacies now.
Exactly. And it's not just the presidential, as absolutely vital as that is. And of course, every member of the US House and the Congress is up for election this year. So find out who that is in your area, and many critical Senate races. And remember your local and state races too. I sometimes talk to people and they can tell me the ins and outs of what's happening in Nicaragua and the power play, but they don't know the name of their own state senator. So we need to get to know our local people, find good people and help them out, make some phone calls or whatever kind of support you can do. That's so true. And I'm wondering for you, I know a lot of women in particular are, even if they're confident in general life, can be very shy around politics. They don't feel like they know enough. But often even, particularly women feel like they lack the confidence to speak out, they lack the confidence to be a leader. You have been, had incredible confidence and poise for 35 years as a national and global leader. What advice do you have for women who want to speak out, want to be more of a leader, but they kind of lack the confidence or they're holding themselves back?
I once read a study that for a woman to feel confident to share her opinion, she needs to feel 80% sure of her facts. And for a man to feel confident to share his opinion, he has to feel 20% sure of his facts. So there was a time when I knew that there were certain areas I need to educate myself more in, and talking to you as an example, because you have been someone, I think particularly with economics, you have been one of my main mentors and one of my main teachers. But it's kind of like geometry. Once you see the theorem, you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you see it, you get it. It's kind of like watching a soap opera, and the first day you watch it, you don't know who the characters are and you don't know what the plot is, and you have it on for a few days and then you go, oh my God, she's having his baby. You totally get it. You just have to start reading the newspaper. Eleanor, you should do some kind of webinar on the basics of some of this stuff, of some of these policies. You'd be great at that. I mean, I know that because I've been blessed by, by your own tutelage, in my own life. I have kept up my Marianne2020.com site, because it's now called mariannenow.com for that very reason. Eleanor, you and I work together with some others on so many of those issues, and they're still up there. I kept them up there so people could see, and I think it's really great. Please look at, I think if you do marianne2020.com, it now redirects to mariannenow.com. I saw somebody put it in the chat. Read through those issues. Don't be so afraid of it. And like, once you start getting it, it's not as complicated as it appears once you see. And then what Eleanor was saying is so significant. The same thing that's being played out on a federal level is being played out on a state level and on a local level. I said throughout my campaign for president, I don't want to go to Washington and fight for you. I want to go to Washington and co-create with you, because the same things that are problematical in Washington are problematical in your state and problematical in your city. I used to say on the campaign, and I think I said this even before my campaign, we need to look at city council meetings as the new hot thing to do. Like, women need to start saying, we're going to a city council meeting on Tuesday night. Want to go with me? Too many people have never been. And you and I have taken part. You and I have known each other for decades. We used to go on these lobbying things with the Peace Alliance, etc., to Washington. It's fun. And by the way, Eleanor, so I'll be talking to you about this. I want to start something called the Center for Visionary Politics.
Oh, great.
By being one of our fellows. And hopefully we'll have our first inaugural event in a Sister Giant type of conference on inauguration weekend. So stay tuned.
Oh, that's really exciting.
Yeah, thank you, Eleanor. I want to talk to you about that further.
Absolutely. And I do encourage folks who are tuning in, definitely go to Marianne's website. I think marianne.com.
Yeah, go to Marianne.com, and then in the section that says politics, oh, look, Jean Houston is there. The tribe is all gathered on this call. Yeah, and they can see more of the political issues when it redirects to mariannenow.com.
And what a great place to start. If you feel like you're not informed about the issues, go to Marianne's website, check it out. Read your book. It's awesome. A Politics of Love. What a great primer for someone who wants to know kind of what's going on. But don't wait till you know everything. Just, your country is in trouble and your country needs you.
And you know what you just said is really important. I think sometimes women feel like, who am I to talk? They've created this image that you have to be part of the political class to have an opinion. But the political class is what got us here. They're the problem. They're not of themselves a solution. And in the US Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the way this country was founded, there's not supposed to be a political class. We're not a monarchy. We're not an aristocracy. A democracy means all of our voices matter. But I think women particularly, I read another study that was interesting to me. It was that if a woman is alone in a meeting, let's say, and she expresses a more humanitarian element, perspective on something, and everybody, most of us have had this experience, everybody at the table rolls their eyes, or there's this really awkward silence. And it's like, and she just falls apart inside because it's just a humiliation. And then the conversation will go on. And somebody will say something really condescending like, we're not here to talk about that, or something like that. The study showed that even one other person saying, well, actually, I agree with her, and the entire system shifts. An agreement between two people is the most powerful thing in the world.
That's great. And I think as people start to speak out and do more,
women, speak up for other women. You hear
we need it.
Saying what you believe, say, I agree with her. Put it on your social media, put it on your Facebook, put it on your Instagram, put it on your Twitter. I agree with her.
Absolutely. And the other thing that happens is a man can pick up what the woman said and say it, and everyone credits him as brilliant. It's
Oh,
like, wait a minute, that was the
Eleanor,
woman.
don't even get me started.
So, but yes, this is, back to the theme here, time for everyone, particularly women, to speak out, get involved, get informed. Don't wait. You don't have to know everything. Just, read some of Marianne's book and
Because what
website.
you do know, what you do know is that we should feed the babies. Hello. Don't
Right.
apologize for what in every advanced mammalia species that survives and thrives, a common characteristic is the fierce behavior of the adult female of that species when she senses that there's a threat to her cubs. You see it in the bear, you see it in the lion, you see it in the tiger, this fierceness that comes, like if you go, let's say you go to a place like Montana or Wyoming, where they have bears, right? And the
Yeah.
guides will talk to you about the black bears. And they'll say, well, they'll leave you alone. They don't really want to have anything to do with you either, but don't get near their babies. They'll come after you. That's how the adult female behaves in a species that intends to survive. So a woman should not apologize for the fact that actually, I think we should feed the children first. When you have 1 billion people on the planet who are living on $1.25 and less a day, that's called deep poverty. And then you have another billion above that living on only $2 a day. This American women, if the women in the Western democracies rose up en masse and said, this needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. Right now, they have these fancy meetings, the G7 meetings, and they meet in all these fancy places to discuss those things that are the most important to the advanced democracies. The United States should stand for the first issue being the eradication of global poverty, which Jeffrey Sachs and others have already proven is an eminently doable job. It's simply not where our intention lies.
Exactly right. And I think the way you approach and talk about politics from a very deep spiritual understanding, and talking about a politics of love is a great doorway for a lot of people, particularly women, to come into what they see as a toxic environment and really hold their ground. Can you talk a little bit about, because so many people see this as so different, what do you mean by a politics of love?
A politics of love means a politics of justice, a politics of mercy, a politics of compassion. How can you let a child starve? How can you let 13 million American children in the richest country in the world go to school hungry? How can you abide by racial disparity in criminal sentencing? How can you abide by an established pattern of execution of unarmed Black men? How can you abide by tax policy that continues to make it easier for a very few to thrive and harder for the many to even survive? This is common sense. What have we done to the idea that we're here to love each other, help each other, collaborate with each other? I mean, even talking about women, back in the 70s, which is the wave of feminism that I grew up in, it was understood that there was no serious feminism without the concept of sisterhood, that none of us will get there unless all of us get there. The balance in America is individual liberty that is balanced with a concern for the collective good. It's not enough. You say, what is a politics of love? A politics of love means it's not enough for me to love my child. We have to have public policy that takes care of every mother's child. The love that will save the world is not just the love for my child, but the love for all children. The behavior that will save the world is not just me taking care of my home, but my recognizing that the earth itself is all of our home. This is what it means for us to evolve from me to we, to make all human endeavor a part of that collaborative venture. That's what business can be. That's what politics can be. That's what all human relationship can be. Not you or me winning, but both of us winning. That's how the universe is set up. And we have disconnected from the natural intelligence of the universe. And our realignment with the natural intelligence of the universe takes us to what you said when you began today. We will either evolve into that reconnection, or this planet will become uninhabitable. You know, so many times, Eleanor, I've heard people say that my issue about love rather than short-term profit maximization should guide public policy. The question of what would help individuals thrive, that should guide public policy. I've heard people say, oh, she's so naive. It is so the opposite. What's naive is to think we will survive another 100 years on this planet if we don't at least try.
So beautifully said. And the thing that I find actually exciting about this moment is that things that and you and I have talked for decades about, our vision of a transformed society that works for everyone. All the children are fed, everyone gets a quality education, seniors live in dignity. The thing that I find exciting, I always knew we could create that. But it wasn't looking like we were moving that way, and would make, some progress there, but then 2 steps forward, 4 steps back. And now we've got, this fellow, as you call him, a fascist in the White House, and worried about what's going to happen coming up in this election. But I have friends calling me in tears on the day of inauguration going, oh my God, this man's like running our country now. And saying like, well, don't worry about it, but take action and realize that it's like everything that needs to be healed comes up. So he's projecting on a big screen, like racism, misogyny, greed, ego, all of it parading in front of us on a giant screen. So we get to make another choice and say, no, that's not who we are. We choose other.
Well, it is true that he is even worse than we feared. But the Course in Miracles says miracles arise from conviction. There are far more lovers than haters in this country, and there are far more lovers than haters in this world. The problem is the haters are behaving with conviction. Mm-hmm. And too many lovers have been kind of, sort of, sometimes when it's convenient, involved in moving the needle towards love beyond the love in our own personal life. When those of us who love are willing to display as much conviction behind a politics of love as a few people, relatively few people, it seems very scary, but compared to how many of us who love, they're not. They're just very visible, but they're very convicted behind a politics of racism, a politics of bigotry, a politics of really neo-fascism. Those of us who love begin to put as much conviction behind principles of love, of equality, of justice, then we're going to have a miracle in this country. And all of us will someday die knowing that we were part of the change.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for this amazing hour in conversation, Marianne. I always appreciate your wisdom and your inspiration.
Well, I want to thank you. And I also want to point out to everyone who would even be on this call, let's take a moment to realize we are prepared. This community, and to see Jean Houston here, we have had the teachers, we have had the articulators. I talked about how much I learned from you. I talked about how much I've learned from Jean. We have a younger generation now learning from all of us. We are now at a point where it's not so much about data collection. The era of data collection is over. We know, everybody on this call, we know what we need to know. Now it's about owning what we know and supporting each other and demonstrating what we know. And, we all know what happens, how scary it is when there are cells of hate and terrorists get together in cells, but there's nothing like the power of cells of love. And that's what I see conversations like this to be. That increased, once again, as the Course says, an idea grows stronger when it's shared. So thank you so much for giving me the honor and the opportunity to share into the deep listening here. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Marianne.
Bye, everybody.
Noelle, back to you.
Bye. Thank you, Marianne. And
thank you. Thank you so much.
It's been such an honor to have you both here. And I've been typing into the chat, just trying to capture some of your words. And we do have this recorded, and we'll be sharing it with Eleanor and yourself. And, we did pop Jean in on the Dr. Houston in on the video, because We know we're all connected. It's so wonderful, and we're all inspired. And I know our group was inspired originally by Barbara Marks Hubbard, but you're all our teachers. And we thank you so much for the precious time that you're giving to our group. And we're going to do our best to get it out there and get others activated.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Barb, of course, is here with
Thanks, Noel.
God bless you.
Thank you so much.